I'm so tired of people saying that it's just a movie, it's just a comic book, it's just a TV show. Whatever. No, it's not. Stories are the building blocks of our culture, of ourselves, even of our own psychology. We are a product of the stories we tell ourselves about our own past and the experiences on a daily basis, but also the stories that we choose to spend time with. What types of values or feelings or whatever are they promoting? What types that we like to spend our time around? They're going to shape us. They're going to shape our personality and character, and they're going to shape our perception of the world and the acts and behaviors that we put out into the world. And people don't understand that. They go, it's just a movie. It's just this. I can like and promote whatever I want. Well, of course you can, but you should pay attention to the responsibility that you have.
Consume stories responsibly.
As a member of society, as a human being, responsibility to yourself.
Consider the consequences.
You need some balance. You need some certain criteria that is going to make sure you're promoting the right kind of works, or at least have thought through the type of work that this or that story is going to do in our culture, and then make your own decision whether or not that's something you want to support.
Consume stories responsibly. Consider the consequences. Consume stories responsibly.
Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel. Hopefully you guys had a good week, and hopefully the stream is well. It has been a long, hard-fought battle, but there's finally high-speed internet here in the rural area in which I live, and this is the first test stream. Sound Engraver says, looks and sound great. Yeah, it should be great. We should, in theory, fingers crossed, we're testing it out now. We should have no more of roboting occasionally, or the video getting fuzzy or whatever. We had tried one step in between when the nieces would come over and suck up all the Wi-Fi. They don't get access to this high-speed internet. They don't have that. No password for them at all when they come over. So yeah, so hopefully it'll go well tonight. But hope you guys had a good week. Happy Mother's Day to any of you who are mothers, and hopefully you're doing something to honor mom tomorrow in some way or another. But welcome to the stream here. This looks like we got Ghost Planet Max 1.0. Welcome, and happy Mother's Day. I don't want to say names, but I know there's a mother behind that screen name, at least one mother, and then other people as well. Brian Gilmartin, welcome. Big Al dropped in to say hi. I think he's doing a stream on somebody else's channel tonight, but good to pop by and wish me luck. Len Green, welcome. Alec Purdue, good to see you, buddy. Horizon Talker, many more here. Final Fantasy fan, Holocron Jedi, Gentle Savage, and so on. Much more. So welcome, folks. Tonight stream is going to be basically a series of recommendations that if they come off well, I'll cut them out and put them out as their own videos later. But the thumbnail talking about time travel and multiverse has to do with the first recommendation that I have. So I figured I'd talk about that a little bit, as a topic. Everybody, well, you hear it said quite a bit. Well, on the one hand, people talk about, there's so much superhero fatigue in the movies. People are tired of superheroes. There's superhero fatigue. And as I said many times, and funnily enough, as soon as I said it, James Gunn comes out that later week and says it. Not that I think he's listening to my channel or anything. Why would he? Because I criticize him left and right. But the idea that no one's tired of superhero movies. They're tired of poorly done superhero movies. They're tired of superhero movies that are nothing but agenda driven, or just using the genre as a guaranteed vessel, not really putting the time and effort into writing a good heartfelt story and characters that are going to be meaningful and impactful and they're true to their archetypes and so forth. Nobody's tired of that. It's the same thing when it comes to stuff like time travel or the multiverse, I think. You hear it all the time now. People say, I'm so tired of time travel stories or multiverse stories. I don't think, it's case by case, individual case. I mean, I'm sure some people are maybe just tired of it, but I think people are just more tired of people doing it wrong. Hollywood just can't seem to write a good time travel or multiverse story anymore. And it's really kind of annoying because think about the wonderful time travel, movies we've had. I mean, back in the day when the Back to the Future trilogy came out, there are you can punch some holes here and there, if you watch those movies, but you don't care to. You're fully willing to go along with it, suspension of disbelief, because they're so well done. And we'll use that as an example here. We're also going to use the Endgame again as an example of how to do this epically wrong, because the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the most guilty right now of ridiculous time travel and ridiculous multiverse, garbage. But Star Wars too. I mean, Star Wars never should have had time travel introduced. That was such a BS thing that Filoni put into Rebels just so he could bring back his precious Ahsoka and not have her have to die. Time travel has no business in Star Wars, so you do want to make sure it's in the right story, it's in the right franchise, and when you're doing it, you're doing it correctly. I'll say more about that in a second, but welcome. Thank you for the super chat. Daniel Heron, $2 super chat, says, if you sing the Time Warp song, I'll be impressed. Alas, you shall not be impressed. Yeah, I don't sing. But Alec Purdue, thank you, $20 super chat. Dang. So I know you're talking about the Hollywood aspect of these things, multiverse and time travel, but how would you place something like Project X Zone, Dissidia, or even Super Smash Bros. In terms of crossover universes? Well, yeah, I mean, that was one example that I had, because when the Super Mario movie came out, no, I'm not crazy about the Super Mario movie, but I heard some people say, just hearing about it, and they were looking at the projected movie list, like the Zelda's next and, all this kind of stuff. And I heard people say, not everything has to be a shared universe. And I agree with that in principle. At the same time, if you do a Mario Brothers movie, you darn well better have, because that's just implied with that franchise. What implied with the Mario franchise is Smash Brothers. The Nintendo universe is part of that. They've already done that. They've already developed that. It's kind of like, we just live in that day and age where, yeah, you better do a shared universe if you're going to do a property like that. I don't think anybody would be okay. I mean, we'd be okay at first. We'd be just thankful to get a decent Superman movie. If somebody just did a standalone Superman movie, great. But after a while, you can't just keep doing standalone. Like, we're past the days when Nolan can just put out Batman movies and that's it. Even the Matt Reeves, the Batman, that's not going to last long as standalone. It'll either peter out or he'll have to develop that universe in some which way or another. Because we're beyond that now. And we're to the point where these franchises that we loved because they were shared, for geeks, like into the comics or the video games or whatever, that's transitioned to big screen, and we kind of expect it, culture wise. Again, it's done horribly now, and people are getting tired of it being done so horribly. But yeah, so it's good aspect to it there, Alec. So the recommendation I had actually here, and I'll talk about this and then I'll tie it in to the time travel multiverse thing, is, you've heard me talk about it before, but and you might be shocked to hear me mention it if you haven't followed the channel a lot. I really love the Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the show. Really love that show. Always did from the start. I never understood the criticism that it got. I think people were expecting a Marvel superhero show, and it wasn't supposed to be that. It was supposed to be like a spy show in the tradition of like Man from U.N.C.L.E. or even Get Smart in some ways, but it was supposed to be a super spy show. That's what it was supposed to be, not a superhero show. And around a character like Philip J. Coulson is just, man, he's one of my favorite fictional characters out there. He's brilliant. So I liked it from the beginning. Just looking at that season 1 too, I thought it was so many. I mean, it's over now. It's had 7 seasons. I don't know if I want to do a season by season breakdown. Let me just talk about it overall first. I stopped after season 5 because season 5 had sort of a natural close to the series. The writers didn't know if they were going to get a next season renewal, so they kind of closed it out, but left the door open in case they wanted to do more. And they ended up doing 2 half seasons after that. And I finally got around to watching those 2 half seasons. It took me a while. It took me some years to come back and watch those 2 half seasons. One, because I was getting a little nervous The actors behind the show were starting to speak out more and more about politics and whatnot. Um, in a couple spots in the last couple seasons of the show, like season 5 and season 4 of the show, you had little digs, little drops that you saw the writers just kind of getting a political statement through here and there. Nothing overt to ruin the story or anything, but even the slightest little thing like that is bad writing. It takes you out of the moment. So I thought, okay, this wonderful series that, in my opinion, has been so well written and so well developed, if it's starting to show a couple little cracks like that in today's day and age, the last 2 seasons are going to be garbage. It's not even going to be worth watching because people are just, it's just accepted that you must preach your politics. That's how Hollywood operates. So I was kind of worried that those last 2 half seasons would just be garbage. I'm happy to say they weren't. I'm happy to say that they were 2 amazing I say half seasons. It's really more 1 season that was divided because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. started doing this thing right around season 2 or 3, in which instead of dragging out one arc for like 24 episodes and people just get bored and you got a lot of filler episodes, instead of doing that, they would make a season out of 2 mini arcs. And the mini arcs would take about 13 or so eps a piece. And they would be related. The first mini arc would translate and transfer, kind of like a plot B, and the first mini arc would become plot A in the second mini arc, so it was all well done. But that's what the last 2 seasons feel like. They feel like 1 season with 2 mini arcs, but they were aired as 2 little mini seasons. But really could not recommend it enough. I watched the last episode and I texted Sound Engraver. I said, what did I say? I said, I am profoundly and utterly wrecked, but in the best way possible. Like, it was just such a great ride. And I'm going to talk about the time travel and multiverse here in a second, because see, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the cool thing about Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I like the fact that it ended. As much as I like the show, and in theory, I would love to see more stories about these characters, not in today's climate. Nope, that ended. Let's just stop it. Stop it. Don't tell any more stories. I don't trust Hollywood. I don't even trust the writers and actors and whatnot who made this great show to do any more with it. Because in today's climate, they would just try to preach some way or another or bring their ideologies into it somehow. So I'm glad it's over, wonderful as it is. I was also really glad that Marvel kind of washed their hands of the show. And that happened even early on, even in the first couple seasons, in which the Marvel Cinematic Universe is still very much tries to claim Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It was still not very connected. Like, you didn't have a lot of main characters come over into the show. You had Lady Sif at one point, stuff like that. It was more kind of it, and it started to develop, and then by the end, it truly is its own little alternate timeline of the MCU. It doesn't acknowledge really or recognize Infinity War or Endgame or any of that stuff. There's a slight mention of maybe something going on Infinity War wise, but that's it. It doesn't talk about it anymore, and it covers everything. It's such a good. It started out as a super spy show. By the end of season 7, you've gone through science fiction, through spy shows, you've gone through time travel dramas. They just went everywhere with that show, and it was done so well. It blended so many components of shows that I've loved before. It's kind of like one thing that Farscape did so well, if you're a Farscape fan. I love the idea that characters would come and go from Farscape. If someone died or someone left, they're gone, Not to say that characters can't come back in certain ways and stuff like that, but nothing was done cheaply. Things meant something. There was weight, there was gravity to something when it would happen. So you had characters coming and going. You also had a theme, a consistent theme from season 1 to season 7. The whole show of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I'm not going to try really hard not to do spoilers because I don't want anybody to any of this to be ruined. I really do recommend, if you're looking for a good show to watch, you got 7 solid seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. if you ever wanted to. Where was I going with it before I did that little interjection? The theme, that's right. The opening season, even the opening episode, the pilot, you've really got Coulson and Skye, they call her at first. Later they call her Daisy, but Skye. Coulson and Skye, these 2 characters, is the core, sort of the emotional core of the show. And it's a father-daughter type of relationship that develops. And so the real theme of the Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show is family. And they carry that throughout the whole seasons. They try those family relations, they try those sibling relations, and figuratively speaking, they're not like an actual blood family, but they're a family team. And people coming and going, and then all the way to the end in the last season, and it really does feel like a family evolution, and it's just so good. I don't know why people sleep on this show. I really don't get it. It just became kind of it's like Nickelback. It just became the cool thing to say that they sucked or the show sucked, or whatever. So then everybody's like, yeah, I'm not watching that show's bad. Yeah, but do you know anything about it? Well, I mean, I heard it was bad. Or I watched 2 episodes and couldn't get into it. Well, I mean, if you can't get into it, you can't get into it. But again, I think people weren't expecting the right thing. I'm geeking out about it for a little bit, so I got to keep geeking out about it. But the first season, Joss Whedon developed this show. And what I think is so funny is that Joss Whedon developed this show as a nod to Firefly. If you ever watched Firefly, the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you have the team there. They've got their special plane, their special ship, the bus they call it, which is like Firefly, like the Serenity. You've got a captain who's enamored with the past. Coulson loves the past, gadgets and stuff like that. Captain Malcolm J. Reynolds, of course, was very much stuck in the war of the Alliance and whatnot. You've got a second in command woman who's fiercely loyal to the captain, Zoe May. You've got the muscle of the team, who would be either Jane or Ward, in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the muscle of the team, whose loyalties are a little, suspect here and there. He's a little bit doesn't belong, but sort of belongs. You'll keep watching and seeing how all that plays out. And then you've got the male and female geek. In Serenity, you had, I'm blanking on their names now, but the doctor and what's her name, the engineer. And you've got the little male and female geek of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s team there. Then you've got the girl who comes aboard, who would be River in Firefly, there's more to her. You find out she's got secrets about her that even she doesn't know yet, And if you look at River Tam's character progression, you see that. And that's what Sky/Daisy's character progression is in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So he very much took the Firefly template and did it in this, new universe. And it was done quite well. Now, it does kind of follow, at first anyway, some of the Marvel Cinematic Universe projections. So like when the Winter Soldier thing happens, well, that's going to blow up the world of S.H.I.E.L.D., right? And it deals with that so well. Philip Coulson is an aspirational hero all the way, beginning to end. He's truly aspirational. He goes through some true epic character progression. I mean, really doing some soul searching and whatnot, and you see him progress. But it's so good. Oh, it's just, I'm trying not to spoil things. It does have time travel. Okay, let me talk about this. Let me get back to the time travel multiverse thing. MCU just crapped out on the time travel MCU multiverse thing. Endgame is probably one of the most horrible time travel movies there is. And it tries, like, it even sort of has these scenes where it just tries to like convince you that it doesn't have to follow any time travel rules that you would expect. Like when Ant-Man's asking about, well, what about this? And Hulk's like, why do people think time travel works like that? It doesn't work like that. Well, your whole audience expects it to work like that. And they're not buying this garbage take that you have on it. It's ridiculous. It's just, it leaves you with a foul taste in your mouth. The other thing they do in time travel with Endgame is they don't respect any of the journeys or stories that you've already been through, right? One of the problems with Endgame that I didn't even mention in my last tirade about it was how it just spits on or kind of smirks on and just like, it makes fun of all of the journeys you've been on with the MCU. Not all of them, but when they go back to the time period of the original Avengers movie and they're having to get the Tesseract basically, and they pose as themselves and all that. And you've got them fighting themselves back then and they mess up the whole continuity, and then Loki survives. It's just like, wait, no, what? No, I watched that Avengers movie and I loved that story arc and I cared about what the characters were going through in that arc. I don't want to see a movie about them later on laughing at themselves. I don't want to see Captain America fighting himself and going, yeah, I do have America's ass. Who thought that was a good idea? That is such a garbage movie. I've just come to learn and feel more strongly about that as it ages. It does not age well. There was a little bit of afterglow from just seeing some of the cool moments of it, Cap holding Mjolnir and so forth. But it's no, that movie is aged horribly. It's just such a garbage. Yeah, Fat Thor. Don't even get me started on that. It's just Hulk, cucked Hulk. No, 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 no. It was such a garbage movie in every way. And I don't know why people don't understand it. But the time travel treatment was linked to the multiverse treatment. And that's just where the MCU took off from after that. Like every movie almost that was made after that deals with that multiverse time travel gobbledygook that's not handled very well. So I've already hinted at one thing that people do, that Hollywood does poorly. They don't honor stories that you've already set through. One of the cool things about S.H.I.E.L.D., and again, I'm not going to spoil things, but when S.H.I.E.L.D. does start getting into some time travel, they make it very clear, and they establish that once the story in the show is that once you alter something in a timeline, that's set off now as an alternate timeline. So especially in season 7, when they're doing some time travel, and you see things kind of like unravel big time in the history of all the villains that they fought and so forth. And you have to remind yourself, I had to remind myself watching it, wait a minute, no, this is an alternate timeline. And they come back and assert that in the end too, that you can go back to that original timeline where things are as you know it, because you've been through those stories with those characters. You're emotionally invested. You don't want to just suddenly, on a writer's whim, yeah, none of that happened now because we changed the time stream. None of that happened now. Like, no, that it can be cool. It can be fun. Like if you remember in Back to the Future 2, when Marty and Doc are, in a lot of ways, like right there over top of or behind Marty in the original movie, they're careful not to change up or make any, if something is changed, it's something they have to go back and fix. They're careful not to disrespect or just do away with any of the journeys you've already been on with those characters. And that was fun. It was fun seeing them like that because you knew they weren't messing things up, or if they did mess something up, they'd have to go back and fix it and so forth. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. does that extremely well. It honors the stories and the journeys that you've already been on. It's not going to just brush them aside because they think this is a cool writing idea. Well, we'll just clean slate it, Time jump. No. Oh, time jump. Anyway, and then the multiverse idea. I've talked about this a little bit before, but one of the reasons why Hollywood just can't write a multiverse story to save their lives now, and this is true with DC and Marvel, whether you're looking at the DC crossover events on TV that they would do, which were just so horribly written. Every single one of them was just crap. Once it gets to be alternate universes and this and that, they don't give you any center to cling to, and it becomes a crutch. Like, oh, what different alternate version of this character can we have this time or another? And what can we have this time? And they also use it as ways, I've said before, like the Spider-Verse, let's take a dump all over Peter Parker because he's a white guy. He's a heteronormative white guy. And we're really not happy with him being the character associated with Spider-Man anyway. But if we have to keep him around, we'll do a movie about our Miles Morales character, and we'll crap on alternate universe Peter Parker. No, guys, it's okay. That was alternate universe Peter Parker that we did that with. We know what you're doing. We know what you're doing. And I'll never understand why people try to defend the Spider-Verse movie. In the first movie, it's just not anybody can be Spider-Man. I said this before. Spider-Man is Peter Parker. Period. If you want a fun alternate universe take, yeah, sure, go look at Spider-Ham or Miles Morales Spider-Man, but keep that crap in another universe. Stop trying to bring it all over and everybody's Spider-Man. No, that's such a progressive ideologue move. This is what the problem with Guardians of the Galaxy is. I truly don't understand so many people that claim to be tired of Hollywood's nonsense. So many people that claim to be sick of Marvel's BS. Yeah, but Guardians of the Galaxy 3, though, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. Don't talk to me about how much you hate the MCU if the next second you're going to tell me that I did go see Guardians of the Galaxy 3, though, and that was pretty good. Like, what? Could you imagine if people were that wishy-washy about their reaction to Bud Light? Like, it's wonderful seeing Bud Light just tank. Bud Light's like never coming back as a brand. That's gone. It's dead, right? And it's wonderful. Good riddance to them. It deserves them. It serves them right. They deserve it. But could you imagine if people treated Bud Light like so-called, freedom fighters for the Star Wars or Marvel treat these properties? If you have people like, yeah, I'm tired of Bud Light, preaching to me with their, yeah, I mean, I'm not, I am going to order some cases for, this event coming up because I already had that planned and I need to make sure I got Bud Light for that. But after that, no, I'm not ordering anymore. Could you imagine if they did that kind of stuff or said, well, I do still need my one Bud Light a week for this, so I'm not going to change that because that's kind of special when I go do this or that, after work. So yeah, but I'm really mad at them. I mean, if they made all kinds of apologies and excuses to go still drink Bud Light, as so-called fandom menace does to still go support Star Wars or Marvel shows or movies or whatever, Bud Light would still be thriving right now. And that's what we're seeing with the MCU or Star Wars. You get so many people supposedly huffy and mad about their treatment of this and that. Oh, but I got to go see the Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy 3 movie because I got to complete that. No, you don't. Sit your butt at home. Stop squealing about crap. Ugh. A little bit of a divergence there. Alec Purdue, thank you for the $5 super chat. Said home stuck. Home stuck? Did it best by ending timelines when they served their purpose and couldn't contribute to the ongoing short story anymore. I don't know what Homestuck is. Is that an anime thing or? Not sure what that is, but yeah, when you realize that you can't contribute to ongoing stories anymore, time to hang it up. And it's okay. Things should end. One of the cool things about the Marvel Cinematic or the Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is that the relationships evolved and changed. Sometimes they broke. And that's the way it should work because we want to see stories mirror our human experience, not necessarily the realities of human world. We do want to see archetypes and idealized things. We do want to see those in stories, but we should have the imitation of the human experience. And this is something why Filoni, for example, let me just say it right now. Filoni is a garbage writer. And if you want to try and pretend that he's anything other than a garbage writer, you're fooling yourself. You're absolutely fooling yourself. You need to go back and do your homework. His name has been attached to some really cool stories, to some really cool things, but as one of the writers, right? And the way that works in Hollywood is that, especially if you're a producer and you kind of have a sort of an idea or a guiding hand a little bit over here or there, you get to be listed as a writer. You didn't write crap. That's like somebody saying, I've got a really good idea for a story. Here, can you write the script? Well, okay, but I'm the writer then because I'm the one doing the work. I'm the one making sure that it breathes, that there's pacing, that there's character development, that people give a crap about the characters, that they're invested, that there's a progression. That's the writing. The idea isn't the writing. And that's all Filoni is. He's an idea guy. Sometimes it's a cool idea, sometimes it's not, but he's not a good writer. And that shows up in a number of ways. And one of the ways it shows up is that he came out and said, I don't like things to end. I don't like things to end. So that's why he tries to keep his precious little waifu, Ahsoka. She's going, and as I've said before, if he has his way, he will completely remake Star Wars into Star Wars, the Ahsoka Tano story. He wants to insert her into every important pivotal moment of the franchise's history. She can never die. He wants to, he's already tried to make her basically the Gandalf of Star Wars. He's put certain lines in her mouth with Rebels and Clone Wars even, and he wants to do that even more now with this garbage Ahsoka series that's going to come out. And yet a bunch of you simps are going, well, I got to give it a chance. This is, he can't write. The only thing to my knowledge, now maybe there was a Mandalorian or a Boba Fett or something like that show since then, but the only thing to my knowledge that he wrote 100% by himself is the Siege of Mandalore arc. And that's garbage writing. I don't care if you liked it. It's poorly developed. I don't understand how people can like this. What is it about Ahsoka that's got people so... I think it's just a bunch of lonely fanboys or something. I don't know. She's an insufferable brat, and she never did change. People say she changed. No, she didn't. Dave Filoni doesn't know how to write character progression. He can't. He can't do character progression. And people point to, how can you say that? Look, in the Clone Wars movie, see, she was, or in the series, see, she was young and bratty, but then remember when she was grew up and stuff like that? Yeah, let's talk about that. Did you see her change at all? There's this really ridiculous defense that goes around. People who like Ahsoka try to say, see, she learned. She's not like Rey. She had to train and learn, and that's a good example of writing of a character showing us how she's learned. And no, you never saw Ahsoka learn anything. Dave Filoni can't show character progression, so what he does instead is he does time jumps. Time jump. Now the character's magically the way we think she should be. Time jump. Now she's older. Now she won't be bratty. But he couldn't even stay consistent with that, because after the time jump of the original Clone Wars series, and she was suddenly older and a little, more calm or whatever, she still reverts to bratty self, to her bratty Ahsoka self, randomly without reason. There's no reason for it. There's no revert, trigger or anything. She's just a brat. She's a brat. She's a Mary Sue character. She's a Mary Sue character because the whole plot of the story bends over backwards not to make her suffer any consequences for her actions. It did that at the beginning. It still did it after the time jump, which supposedly fixed everything. People are thinking, yeah, Grogu learned from Luke. So he learned from Luke. So that's okay that he has Jedi powers. What? That's as good as a time jump. Well, he was over here with Luke for a while, and we didn't see him for a while. And now he came back, and he can look at the things that Grogu was able to do in season 3 or even Book of Boba Fett or whatever. He's practically a full Jedi, and he had that little bit of time training with Luke, and that's supposed to do it. Dave Filoni doesn't know how to write character progression because he doesn't want characters to change. He doesn't like change, doesn't want things to end. So when he does a little time jump to try to assuage people and here's reasons why this thing should happen in the story or whatever, it doesn't work. It comes off flat, and you don't have any emotional investment in this character having progressed or trained or learned or anything like that. It's really garbage. Why are people hooked on her character, or the thinking that her series is going to be anything different than the garbage you've been receiving? It's just I don't know. But anyway, that's another example. As I said, they inserted time travel into Star Wars just to save his precious waifu Ahsoka. No, this time travel doesn't belong in Star Wars. No. But you can't tell people that. You can't tell people that. They need to consume, gotta consume, even if they say they're against consumers. If the right thing comes out, if a Guardians of the Galaxy 3 comes out, though, I do have to go consume that. So, all that to say, I do recommend Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the series. If you're in the market for a series, it just goes through so many great things. I mean, the Ghost Rider arc was great. The Framework arc, oh my gosh. The space arc, it's just so. Anyway, I'll stop gushing. There is and we can still talk about the time travel multiverse topic here, definitely, if you guys have more to say about it. But there's another recommendation that I wanted to give, and probably cut it out as its own video. I teased a while ago at the end of one of the streams. I didn't have time to do it, and I talked about the Witcher comics that I was really a big fan of. And I want to talk about those a little bit more. I want to talk about specifically Volume 1, the omnibus Volume 1 of The Witcher by Paul Tobin. These came out right around the time Witcher 3, hit and was big. I don't know the exact timeline there, but that's around the same time. So this predates the Netflix garbage show. Netflix, if that's all you know of Witcher, if you watch the Netflix and you think that's The Witcher, that's not The Witcher. There's a really cool video. I have to go find it. A guy did this little animated video where Geralt from the games and the books is meditating, and then suddenly, poof, Henry Cavill's Geralt shows up. And they're like, who are you? And I'm Geralt. No, I'm Geralt. And they have this competition about saying, yeah, but what happened when this and that? And you hear all the ridiculous things the Netflix series did that would never, ever happen with the real characters that you've seen in the games, comics, and books. Yennefer never even remotely considers going to sacrifice Ciri just so she can stay young and beautiful and powerful. I mean, it's Triss is a nightmare. They're just garbage characters in that show. See the light. Go. Play the games, read the comics, read the books. Now, what I love about the comics in particular, so I want to talk about this a little bit more, is that I do have to talk a little bit about the wanderer archetype, because that's what Geralt is. Geralt is a wanderer archetype. And I think the books actually dropped the ball on this a little bit. I think the first two books, they're collections of short stories by Sapkowski. They are just freaking awesome. Those first two collections of short stories are so good. They're so good because they deal with Geralt of Rivia as the Wanderer. And this is what the comic book does as well. So let me talk about what the Wanderer is as an archetype, because I haven't done that yet. The Wanderer crosses boundaries. Now, if you've listened to my archetype videos, you know that each archetype does something to boundaries, like the trickster blurs boundaries, the frontiersman straddles boundaries, and so on. And if you're not paying a lot of attention to what I talk about boundaries, you might think that's sort of a dubious distinction. It's not really. If you think about it, you have to be very literal with the language. When I say that the trickster blurs boundaries, I mean that, blurs it, sort of like you can't quite tell where the boundary is. You know it's there. It doesn't do away with the boundary, but it can't quite tell where it is. So like Spider-Man, blurs a lot of boundaries in his character, and one of them is blurring the boundary between boy and man. A good Spider-Man story should show you Peter Parker, whether he's 15 or 25, or heck, even 30 sometimes, and you really shouldn't know if he should always have a little bit of boyishness to him and a little bit of, being a man as well. And the best Spider-Man stories get that right. So that's an example of blurring boundaries, where a character like the frontiersman needs to straddle boundaries, having one foot firmly planted in one world and the other foot firmly planted in another world. So they're of two worlds, so to speak, but only those two distinct worlds. So, for example, the best example that I give when I teach my class is Hawkeye from not from Marvel, although he's kind of a frontiersman, but from Last of the Mohicans. He's a white man who was raised by the Mohican Indians, by the Delaware Indians, and so he's got those two. Now, those two worlds don't blend together within him. He constantly talks about in that novel, it's my white blood that tells me this. It's my Indian upbringing that helps me do this, and he's not a good tracker because he's, of white blood, but he does know the land and know this and that because of his Indian upbringing, So you've got two worlds within the frontiersman, and there's a clear distinction, but he's just got one foot in one and one foot in the other. The Wanderer crosses boundaries. The Wanderer goes into different worlds, many different worlds. And I'm using worlds kind of in quotes. I mean, it can be different lands, different, whatever, different planets if it's a Wanderer there. But the Wanderer is like characters like Conan the Barbarian, unless you're talking about a story in which he was king or whatever. But he's a Wanderer, the Wanderer with a conscience. The Wanderers always have a code, and their code, it's something that they personally believe in. It's just their own set of values. It's not necessarily a code like a law or something like that. The Incredible Hulk, David Banner in the Incredible Hulk series from the 60s, he was written as a wanderer, and very much so. He was in a different town or different place each episode. He was constantly on the move. He's fleeing from the military and whatnot, but he's also trying not to hurt people and so forth. He does have a certain code. He often has to go up against corrupt law officials or whatever, or help people. He's a doctor, so he can't see somebody in pain or in need, not help them. He's got his own internal code, but he's always on the move. That's what Geralt of Rivia, that's the way you see him in those first two novels. Those are first two collections of short stories. He's got a code that he follows. And to some degree, it's the Witcher's code, but it's also sort of his own code. Like, even so, he's not going to see somebody suffer and let them, just die if they're an innocent and so forth. I mean, not to say that he's like an aspirational hero by any means, but he's got a code and he's a wanderer. Those first two books get that really well. Now, the novels after that, first couple novels, I can't remember exactly the delineation. The novels are fine, but eventually it starts to kind of deconstruct his character so it can be more series story instead of his. You have him question whether even he should be a witcher or slay monsters at one point. The novels just get dumb by the end. By the end of that main arc, I was just reading the books first, and I was really pissed off, to be honest, because he really just decided he didn't care about Geralt anymore, and it was series story. And he did do one novel after that, which was a prequel novel that was pretty good again. That was pretty good, and it kind of like said at the end that this might be a novel in an alternate time. Like, who knows what happens after this novel? It's not necessarily the same time course of events as the other ones, So I kind of liked that at least it left it on that note. Now, I say all that, and the response or the defense might be, well, look, he sets up that father-daughter relationship between Geralt and Ciri, he the father has to be there for the daughter. At some point the daughter has to go on and take center stage. Yes and no. The comics, let me pick this up where it fell here. The reason I love the comics so much is because the comics don't really, it's a collection of short comic arcs. So it's not like one graphic novel arc. But some of these stories, some of the comic arcs in the comics take place much later when he and Ciri are out being witchers together. And so it does a good job of showing Geralt the father figure, as well as earlier Geralt stories where it's just him alone, all traveling, which are a lot of fun that I love as well. I love the idea of Ciri. I love the father daughter relationship. He sort of takes on surrogate father for her character, especially with Yennefer as the surrogate mother. Neither of them are able to have children of their own. So I love that idea. And the comic book shows how, yeah, you can have that. You can have her grown and even doing her own, from the game continuity, in a lot of ways. And it doesn't mean that you have to deconstruct or poo-poo Geralt or Yennefer or any of them at that point. They don't just have to fade away into the distance, which is one thing I'm worried about the next game that they're supposed to be doing, the next Witcher, where I think there's going to be Ciri front and center. I'm pretty sure they're going to try and, topple Geralt out of it some which way or another. The art is really good in this. I think it's some different artists here and there, but it's so good. It does the actually make sure that this is not a nude scene. Occasionally you'll see a breast or something like that. It's that kind of comic. Which is the case for like sword and sorcery or fantasy, stories like that. Not that it's like there's no porn in it. There's no like gratuitous sex scenes or anything, but it's of that genre. Just make sure I'm not showing that on the camera. Get my YouTube channel taken down. But the Omnibus Volume 1, it's so good. It's the Wanderer done right. And I'll have to do a proper standalone Wanderer archetype video at some point to really do that well. But I do recommend Volume 1 of the Omnibus, The Witcher, Paul Tobin. They did the comic series continued to the point where they did a Volume 2. I think you can get like the more expensive hardcover of Volume 2 right now, but the paperback trade paperback of Volume 2 is due out, I think, September. So you can keep going with it if you want, which is what I'm going to do. I'm definitely going to get Volume 2 and see if it continues to hold up, because I was really pleased with that. It was a good comic reading experience again. So I was happy with that. Couple of other reviews, because people always ask me, I talk a lot on the channel about the problems with so many things in entertainment, and people say, well, what talk about the stories we could read, some of the older stories or some of the things that people don't know about. So I'm totally up for doing that. There's one novel that I just finished the other day. Sound Engraver has never, there's a lot of science fiction and whatnot TV that Sound Engraver hasn't watched. So we've been going through, shows. She watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with me and been going through different things. And we just started about a month ago. Actually, let me get to the super chat before I talk about it. Alec Purdue for $5. Thank you, sir. Oh, by the way, I did see that you were talking about Homestuck as a webcomic or something like that. Yeah, I wouldn't know about that. But thanks for pointing it out as an example. But thank you for the $5 super chat. It says, based off your description of the Wanderer archetype, I think you'd really like Fist of Time, North Star, and Berserk. Every time somebody recommends Berserk to me, it just gets pushed farther away from me. I know you don't mean that, though. But yeah, maybe those are. I don't know Fist of the North Star or Berserk. I don't know anything about them. So maybe they're Wanderer stories then. Interesting. And if they're done right, that's cool. That's cool. So the Wanderers, it's an intriguing and an attractive archetype. People like that. Especially, and I'll get back to this other recommendation here in a second, but I'm glad you brought that up, Alec, because you kind of triggered something else to talk about, or just to mention anyway. We are seeing in today's story, there's a drive to completely, I talked about this a little bit last time, a drive to completely deconstruct the masculine. We don't want any traditional masculine in our stories. The progressive ideologues, they'll be more okay with traditional feminine than they will traditional masculine. No, that's toxic. It's all these things, blah, blah, blah. We desperately need traditional masculine heroes in stories. The problem, though, I think we see a lot of people sick of not seeing good masculine heroes, and they go to the polar opposite. Let me explain it like this. The real masculine hero, like the true masculinity, what's good, healthy masculinity is to use your power to protect others. Use your authority and your power as a man to protect. So many times we see people, which is no problem with this. You can kind of glory in stories of like, a Punisher like character or whatever, people who use their power to punish and you really, there's room and there's a place for those stories. But I think we're more likely to see kinds of those stories than we are to see a character who just uses his masculinity to protect and kind of exert some self-control, uses his power, authority, all those things that the feminists would just, at, to protect and to be a man. And that's what, a character like Geralt is so great at, because he's all man, believe it. And, with all the sorceresses that he's sleeping with and whatnot. But at the same time, he's not like Leisure Suit Larry either. He's not like licentious for the point of being licentious. It's this other world, other universe. So it's not like morals of ours necessarily apply. And he's in love with Yennefer, and he's loyal to her in the whatever the confines of their relationship at the time demand. Sometimes it's very loose, but anyway, he's very masculine, and he would do anything for Ciri. Once he develops that father-daughter relationship for her, he'd go to the ends of the world for her. He'd do anything for her, and even he'd do anything for Yennefer. But he would even do anything for somebody like Triss, who they had some dalliances at one time. They had been, sort of romantic off and on. If you go by the game's continuity, there's the whole time where she kind of played off the idea that or played off the occasion of him losing his memory and whatnot. But even her as an older, not really love, but an older flame in his life or whatever, he still recognizes that he has a responsibility to make sure that all of the people in his life are cared for, protected, rather, it's just a great example. And I think that's what we are drawn to about characters, the Wanderer archetype, because they show us that masculinity in a lot of ways that are challenged. You think about the Incredible Hulk series, there were challenges to him. Like, how can you be here in this new environment that you've traveled to? You're trying to stay incognito. You're trying not to form any connections, but you see a need. That's pretty much every episode, but that's a common story idea in a lot of the old episodes of the Incredible Hulk show. David Banner's on the run. He's trying to maintain a low profile, trying to be, whatever. But then he sees somebody in need, and he sees a need, and he doesn't want to get involved because he doesn't want to risk bringing the Hulk out and hurting people. He doesn't want to risk, drawing attention to himself and getting the military on his case or whatever again. But he can't leave a need unresponded to. He's got to be there to help people. That's just, I think that's why the Wanderer appeals to people. Even a character like Conan, who, if you go by the old Robert E. Howard stories, he's a thief in his younger days. He's, he loves his women, wine, and song, and so forth. Song, but wine, women, whatever. But he's also not he's not a villain, right? He will, he'll save a damsel in distress and then try to sleep with her, but he'll save her. He won't, if he sees a villain torturing, or picking on somebody, he doesn't he doesn't have a code that makes him get involved. At the same time, if there's something he can do, he probably will, and it's hard to talk about Conan because you've got the Howard stories, and then there's so many other authors have written and done so many things. Actually, mentioning that, I did just start Chuck Dixon's Conan story. Chuck Dixon has been talking a lot about on his social media how an old Conan story he wrote is now available. It was available through Amazon for a time. Now it's available through the original publishers. I bought it and I started reading it just like 10 pages in. It's pretty good. So I'll probably review that when I'm finished with it. But yeah, Chuck Dixon writing Conan. How could that go wrong? He's a great author. Anyway, I know I'm kind of all over the place with subjects tonight, but it's just because I had a lot of ideas. Let me get back to finishing out the topic I was just talking about before I got sidetracked talking about the Wanderer again. Sound Engraver and I've been showing her Stargate SG-1 for the past month or so. It's been a long time. I think I've watched through the whole series twice in my life, but it's been a long time since either of those. So it's a lot of fun for me to go through it again, and she's loving it. We're almost to the end of season 1. I think we're going to finish that out tomorrow night. One of the things I've done this time, though, watching Stargate SG-1, I just love it. You've got the Epic Four. I mean, that is the perfect example of the Mythic Four. I did my archetype video on the Mythic Four. You can't beat Stargate. I mean, that's just boom. It's such a good example of those 4 characters that you come to know and love, and you want them to be together and you want to spend time with them. Remember the producers talking about that when the series was still on the air. They said one of the keys to the series' long-lived success, because the series was on for like 9 or 10 seasons, They said is you create 4 characters that people want to come back and spend time with every week. That's such a key. And that show lasted long into the era where people stopped doing that. That's one of the reasons why SGU was such a garbage show, because they decided to do the opposite suddenly. They put together a team that no one really cared about. It was the Battlestar Galactica formula, where everybody's got flaws, not just little flaws, but like everybody's got shameful things that makes you kind of annoyed with them all the time. And so SGU didn't last because of that. But Stargate SG-1 is solid, and Atlantis was good when it was on like that. So I found out, though, because recently, I've been going through the Star Wars expanded universe and loving all the books and comics and games that expand out the original trilogy and whatnot. I found out that there are a lot of Stargate novels. Now, I did a little research into it, and I read a lot of the reviews, and some of the novels are apparently real stinkers. I haven't read them all yet, but apparently some of them are pretty crappy. I started with one, and I just finished this. It's called Sacrifice Moon. And the reason I started with this one is because this tells the story of the SG-1's very first mission through the Stargate, which you actually don't. Sorry, I got a laminate cover on the old paperback so I bought just to kind of preserve it so it didn't fall over, but the laminate's kind of glaring. Maybe this is, let me see. You can see it a little bit better. Yeah, you can see it a little bit better. Stargate SG-1 Sacrifice Moon. Julie Fortune. It's a pen name for this author. It's a cool idea because it's their first mission through the Stargate, because you don't see that in the show. You see them put together as a team, and you see them get ready to set through the gate at the end of one episode, but you don't actually get to know what happened in that first first mission. This tells the story of that. I was a little hesitant to jump into the Stargate novels. I'm just going to admit this, okay? And you can hate me if you want, but I've said many times, men and women are different. Men and women are very different. Men and women create different types of art. Men writers are different than women writers. Of course, there's individual aspects to this, and every individual writer has their own thing. But there's absolutely a difference between men writers and women writers. Women writers, with exceptions, you'll have some exceptions here and there, are going to be a little bit more interested in the emotions of characters, which is good. You should have good emotional arcs, but they're going to be a little bit more interested and spend a little bit more time on the relationships and emotions, where men writers, again, there's room for variance here, but are going to be a little bit more focused on what needs to be done, even if they're doing interiority. And as you should, you need to have good emotion and good relationships in your stories. It needs to have some good, we've got to get to this next task, especially in adventure story type writing. So I was a little worried that a lot of these were written by women, not because women writers are bad. I'm not even placing a value judgment on those two types of writing. I'm just saying that as a man, I find that I don't tend to enjoy women writers as much as I do men writers. There are some exceptions to that. There are absolute major exceptions to that. My favorite short story ever, well, not ever, one of my favorite short stories ever, it's definitely in my top 5, is Coming Aphrodite by Willa Cather. Oh my gosh, is that flipping amazing. So there are exceptions, of course. So I thought, well, let me go ahead and start it anyway. And I do see that difference in Sacrifice Moon. There are places, it's a really cool setup, a really cool idea. The team is placed in a really interesting challenge. It's like, wow, how are they going to get out of this? But it does spend a little more time showing how it affects each of them individually and psychologically and stuff like that. Now, it's not a drag on the story. Like I said, it doesn't go to the point where it's poor writing. It's just a little too much of that for my taste, But I'm happy to say that it doesn't kill the story at all. I kept with it, and it's a really cool story. There's a tiny bit of a element at the end of the story that I think could be a little bit of a jump the shark moment. Not in terms of how they overcome the villain or anything, but just it's a little something that I think it's very, I don't want to give it away, but it's something that some of the characters have to do that I think is a little too extreme, that it should have been handled, or it should have been explained a lot more. We should have had a lot more details to make this very extreme thing, happen. Anyway, I do recommend the book overall. One of the cool things about it is, if you've watched the Stargate SG-1 series, you know that one of the things that you just kind of have to suspend disbelief over is that every planet pretty much they visit speaks English. This novel actually answers that. It actually talks about why. Apparently, and it's a cool idea. It's a cool idea. I'll see if the other novels ever speak to this or whatever. But they go to this first planet, and it's a planet derived from Greek ancestors. So everybody's speaking Greek. So Daniel's having to translate the Greek to the team and whatnot. Something happens on that planet, and they get sent to another planet through that planet's Stargate. That planet's DHD and Stargate. And as a result, when they go to this new planet, suddenly they can understand all the people there, and the people there can understand them. And they decide that there's actually something embedded in the DHD device. If you know Stargate, you know what I'm talking about, the dial home device, the thing that the ancients actually created that went along with the Stargate. There's something embedded in that means when you go through the Stargate, and they didn't really go into the specifics, they're just kind of hypothesizing about it right now. But in some which way or another, your transition through the wormhole alters your language perceptors to where you can understand other human beings. And that's a cool thing. And the reason it didn't work going through Earth's Stargate is because they didn't have a DHD at Earth. Remember, they had to jerry rig something from the computers and whatnot to make it work. And they're talking about maybe trying to find out what that is in the DHD and then apply it to their Earth Stargate. So if they did that, hypothetically, this would be why in the show, all the planets they go to from here on out, they can understand people. It sounds like they're speaking English. So anyway, just a cool idea. Maybe you like that, maybe you don't. But just the fact that it tried to answer something like that, I do like novels of franchises like this that try to fit into the main continuity and flow. I'm going to try and read the others. I know some of them got really horrible reviews, so some of them might be stinkers, like I said. But I'm going to try to read the others. A couple more things. Pick this up. A few more things coming up that I haven't. Well, these two I've read a long time ago. I want to reread. One of them is Superman: Secret Identity. It's a pretty famous one. Many of you guys probably have read this one. It's really quite good. I know that from when I read it before. Again, that shiny glossy cover, but hopefully you can see that there. It's a trade paperback of it. It collects the run. It's a pretty cool idea. Speaking of multiverse, it's an alternate universe Clark Kent it's a boy named Clark Kent who doesn't have superpowers, but in that universe, Superman is an actual fictional hero. So it's kind of like, imagine our universe right now, our reality, and imagine there's a little boy named Clark Kent, and everybody kind of like jokes with him, like, oh, you got your superpowers or whatever, and everybody like gives him Superman memorabilia for his birthdays or whatever, and he's like, I'm not even that into Superman. I hate the fact that I got this name and so forth. But then one day he gets the powers of Superman, and the question is, what would you do? What would you do if suddenly you were given the powers of Superman in a world that expects certain things from a Superman fictionally? How do you do, and how do you operate that in reality? It's a really cool idea. Now, I can't just do a recommendation of it just yet because it's been decades since I've read it. And I want to reread it now with today's perspective, today's fresh eyes, with the things that are going on in culture today, and see if it still stands up today. Ghost Planet, it was originally supposed to be a Superboy Prime story. Elliot S. Megan wrote stories that kind of set up this idea, and but then it became its own thing there. Another one that I'd read a long time ago before, and see, that's the thing about, and I know someone was asking, when am I going to get to the multiverse? I'm not really talking about the multiverse writing to the same depth or degree that I talked about the time travel writing, but this is a good example. The reason for having a multiverse, the reason for having let's say first, the reason for having an alternate universe, an Elseworlds type universe, is to really have a what if. Let's examine a world where, for example, Bruce Wayne was raised by the Kents and Clark Kent was raised by the Waynes. Let's have a what if, and it can be interesting. It can be a what if, and those are fine stories. It's fine to sort of explore what might have happened. The problem is people become too enamored with multiverse, or let's just, before we get to multiverse, let's start with alternate universe. People become too enamored with the alternate universe takes. This happened with Dark Knight Returns. Dark Knight Returns was not supposed to be written as main continuity Batman. It was what if, Batman and Superman were so politically opposed and Batman retired for so long, and what would make him come back and why and so forth. And just taken on its own as an alternate universe story, it's pretty interesting, pretty fine. But then you had people in DC itself wanting to remake not only Batman at the time, but just their whole DC continuity over in this dark Knight nonsense. And even though Didio wasn't in power at that point, he was still there, and he was part of the problem, everything he did. But that's the problem. An alternate universe should just be that, an alternate universe. Play with ideas, see what might happen, but leave it over there as an alternate universe. Here's what happens. Here's the problem of multiverse. Multiverse is when you take those alternate universes that should be left alone. They should be over there, alternate takes. If you like it enough to want to play with it, then have a separate line. Have the Earth 1 Superman and Earth 2 Superman, like DC used to have before Crisis ruined it all. Have those different alternate realities continuing within their own titles, or even Marvel with the Ultimate, whatever. You have it set apart. The idea of a multiverse only works if you maintain those boundaries between universes. You can go get some help from this other version of a character, like the Lex Luthor from one of the Earths is actually a hero, and there can be cool stories about him crossing over and helping the Superman of our universe or something like that. But you keep the boundaries. DC messed this up a lot with their crises and trying to collapse everything in, over and over again. And we see that now with Marvel too. And Miles Morales is a perfect example. When Miles Morales was first created, he was alternate universe Spider-Man. And it was a cool take. It was just like Spider-Gwen, alternate universe. Cool idea. Hey, what would happen if Gwen's, got the powers instead of Peter Parker? Oh, that's interesting. Let's explore that and see it as its own story. But the ideologues got a hold of it and wanted to make sure that they brought that Spider-Gwen and Miles Morales, Spider-Man, and suck them into the main universe. They want to put their garbage front and center. That's where multiverse falls down, is when you break down the boundaries in between. And that's what you see the MCU has been doing, with the Doctor Strange, with Endgame started it, with WandaVision. What was the other? Oh, Quantum whatever, Ant-Man silly thing or whatever. It's just they don't maintain the rules of multiverse. There's a rules of multiverse writing, and I hadn't prepared to go that far into it, but I'll get into it more, maybe in another video. So yeah, but this is a good example. What if there's a universe in which, just like our own, Superman was a fictitious character, and there was a little boy named Clark Kent who suddenly got the powers of Clark Kent, Superman. It's really good, but I need to read it again just to see if I'd recommend it for today's day and age and culture. Another comic book like that, or graphic novel like that, what did I just do with? Oh, here, is I talk a lot about. The one thing I think, not the one thing, Frank Miller did some cool Daredevil stuff, but Frank Miller's Batman Year One is quite good. He doesn't go crazy like he did with Batman Dark Knight Returns, because this is supposed to be mainstream canon, and it's quite good. And with Batman Year One, that sets things up for the Long Halloween and all these other great stories. There was a comic book run, and I see your comment there, Andres. I'll get to you in a second, but there's a comic book or a run that was put together as a draft trade paperback, Batman Year 2. Now, the comic run wasn't necessarily originally supposed to be necessarily Year 2 in the continuity, so it gets unfairly compared to Year 1, and that's why it got a bad rap sometimes, but I liked it quite a bit. Some cool ideas in it, and I will talk about it. I'm going to read it again. Like I said, it's been a long time since I read it, but I'll read it again to talk about and see if we want to recommend this in today's day and age, especially for all the nonsense ideas that are going on around Batman. So that's something else that's upcoming. Thank you for the super chat there, Andres. Do you think, for $5, thank you, sir. Do you think Post-Crisis is the best DC continuity with JSA and JLA combined, or do you prefer them separate? I do prefer them separate. Absolutely prefer them separate. I'm not one of those grumpy old timers who's like, everything after Crisis sucked. I think a lot of cool things came after Crisis. I really like 95% of John Byrne's run on Superman, for example. But I much prefer, and I think it was just such a big mistake to collapse all those Earths. I don't think it was hard to follow. I think people were following it just fine. I like the idea, and if one line didn't sell, then you don't tell any more stories of that universe. Fine, I liked the pre-Crisis setup there, and I do, just in your mainline continuity, I like the idea of the JSA, being around back then. Of course, originally they had to age up Superman or whatever so he could still be a current hero so long. So
Wonder Woman was originally a part of the JSA. Now, I don't think that should be the case anymore, unless you did do something like with her mother. I don't really like that idea either, though. But anyway, yeah, to answer your question, I like those separate myself, but you tell me what you think, what you like. I don't read current DC comics at all. I just don't. Now, there's two exceptions. Well, there aren't exceptions. DC continuity is garbage. Marvel continuity is garbage. I don't know why people want to read this crap. I don't care if it's with this title actually has some good stuff. I don't care. It's part of the same universe. So that being said, the only thing I would read from a Marvel or DC new is if something wasn't in that continuity, wasn't in that universe. And even then, I wouldn't read it as it came out because I don't trust DC or Marvel. I don't trust anybody there. Something would have to come out that was in a alternate, timeline or whatever, that had nothing to do with the garbage continuity that they do there. Then it would have to continue for quite a while, and I'd have to hear consistently good things about it for me to go back and check it out, because I don't think they've earned the chance to get you to try it right away. So two of these examples here I've got that are coming up I haven't read yet, but I'm going to talk about. Spidey Rules said, I do see your comment there. So I'm surprised you and Fan Man like Year 2. Doesn't Batman get Joe Chill's gun and contemplate killing him? I know he doesn't go through with it, but isn't he having him even consider it go against character? Well, that's one of the reasons why I want to reread it again, like post Nolan, because in my memory, I don't think he really, he has a moment. I don't think he really contemplates. He doesn't pull a Bruce Wayne, taking the gun to the courthouse or something, like Chris Nolan had that nonsense, scene. But I'd have to reread it. I don't want to argue with you because it's been so long since I've read it, so I need to reread it. And, I'm not necessarily giving it today's current seal approval. I'm remembering really liking it when I did read it, so I need to reread it and check it out again. Because as I remember, it's not quite like that. But again, I don't want to argue with you because it's been a while since I've read it. So, the other two, good to see you, Slav. To see you there, channel member and all. So these two titles, I've heard some good things about, and I finally waited until they were released in hardcover trades, and I think it's time. I've heard consistently good things about them enough, so it's time to go ahead and give them a try. The first is Superman 78. You might be thinking, how in the world have you not read Superman 78? Oh my gosh, you love Christopher Reeve's Superman. Why in the world wouldn't you read this? Well, again, I don't trust DC. Even with a cool idea, even with bringing back the real Superman, Christopher Reeve's Superman, and going back into that first movie's continuity and telling more stories, I don't trust you, DC. So you'd have to put out something consistently good, at least is what I hear, for a long time before I'm going to give it a chance. So I finally got it. And it is Christopher Reeve's Superman. It's the Superman from the 78 movie. And they're drawn as such. This is, Superman looks like Christopher Reeve, Lois Lane looks like Margot Kidder, and so forth. And it's sort of a comic sequel to that first movie in which Brainiac appears, and he's the next villain. So really cool idea. I've heard wonderful things about it. Robert Venditti has written some wonderful Superman stuff, especially when they used to do the old DC Presents, or what's that called? It was it's in the other room. I can't remember what it was called, but when New 52 was going on, they did a collection of just traditional Superman stories that were new. It was pretty good. Anyway, so that's coming. I'm going to read that and review that. And the other example of that, right along with that, is the Batman 89. I've heard a little bit more conflicting reports about this, but I've heard enough about it that makes me want to give it a chance now. Again, it's just come out in hardcover, so it's been long enough, and I can give it a chance and see. If you look at the back, this is it's not a sequel to, or is it a sequel to Batman? Yeah, it's a sequel to Batman Returns universe. So it's Tim Burton's Batman, I think. It's Batman Returns. I don't think it's it doesn't disregard Batman Returns. That's my understanding. But it's Tim Burton's universe continued. So Michael Keaton is Batman and so forth. You see on the back, it tells the story of Harvey Dent, District Harvey Dent, Billy D. Williams becoming Two-Face and so forth. And you've got Robin, that he was going to have, what's his name, Wayans as Robin and so forth. And you've got, Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman there and so forth. So I've heard some good things about it. I'm going to give it a try. I've heard a couple things, some conflicting reports. I tried not to listen to too many specific critiques because I wanted to go ahead and give it a chance for myself, as long as I didn't hear any major deal breakers. And so far, I haven't heard any major deal breakers. Not to say I won't find them when I read it, but that's something that I want to read too. So I'm not spoiling them, but I want to give them a read and see if I like them or not. I'm fairly certain I'm going to like the Superman 78, but we'll see. We'll see. I'll give them a read through, and then I'll be doing reviews of those as well. So I'm going to keep doing reviews like this. When I get through more Stargate novels, I'll talk about those. It is planned. Big Al and I talked about doing picking up the book study again for Darth Plagueis from the Star Wars EU, and the book study will be done a little differently. I'll try to show more what makes the book a well-written book this time around, and so we're going to hope to pick that up here this summer. Grades are due from the semester I'm currently wrapping up this coming week. So like I'm literally wrapping things up now and then freeing up schedules and whatnot. So that'll come here soon. Lynn Green said, is that Barbara in the yellow with the bat symbol? I think, yeah, it probably is. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't read it yet. She's got a badge on her skirt. So maybe it's, maybe this version of Barbara is like Commissioner Gordon's daughter, part of the Force or something. I don't know. Yeah, I haven't read it yet, but cool idea. So yeah, we'll give it a check. We'll give it a chance rather and talk about it. Yeah, play John Williams while you're reading Superman 78, definitely. And Danny Elfman while you're reading Batman 89. I know. Such iconic scores, definitely. So, I've gone over my time. I'm definitely feeling the drag, and I need to go eat and veg. But thank you guys for hanging out today. I hope the thumbnail wasn't misleading. I did talk about time travel and multiverse. Now, maybe I'll cut those parts out and just put it as its own little concentrated video so people can just hear what I have to say about those two things, because people get it wrong, and they don't need to get it wrong. It can be really quite good when it's done right, But then some recommendations. Do check out, if you're interested in the Wanderer type stories or fantasy, the Witcher comics, definitely check those out. If you like Stargate SG-1, I do recommend Sacrifice Moon at least. Get the story of the team's first mission through the gate, and I'll let you know how the other books play out. But thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Got a good group here tonight. Appreciate those who super chatted. Definitely appreciate those. Good paying for the wedding. Sound Engraver and I are going to do some things. We're finally meeting with our caterer this week. We were supposed to do it a couple weeks ago, but things kept falling through. But those of you who, even if you didn't super chat, just hanging out, being active in the chat, giving the channel a view and a subscribe, appreciate that. Definitely do. So that's all for tonight. I'll be back with next week and maybe some cutout videos of this in between. But until then, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the true blue, well-written hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.